egotistical, so unpredictable, here on the SNL network.
Yes, that is right. Welcome on in to the Saturday Night Network for a very special interview today in preparation for the world premiere of Bupkis, premiering this Thursday, May 4th on Peacock. My name is Jon Schneider from the SNN. So excited to be with you and all of our guests today to begin our journey covering Bupkis, the new Pete Davidson show that's coming out that everybody has been talking about. So let me bring in our co-interviewers today and our wonderful guest. First up, Sammy Kay. Sammy, how you doing?
John, I'm doing really well. Bupkis has definitely been one of my most anticipated shows of the year ever since it was announced. So I'm excited to have Dave on to talk about it.
Absolutely. And joining us as well is the amazing Amanda Barkin. Amanda, how are you?
Good. Another beautiful rainy day in Brooklyn. I actually got to go to the premiere last week and see the first 2 episodes of Bupkis. So super excited for you all to see and for the rest of the episodes to come out on Thursday. Super excited to talk to Dave.
Yeah, me too, for sure. And Sammy, Amanda, and I will be along for the entire journey to get to cover each and every episode of Bupkis right here on our YouTube channel and on all audio platforms. So I hope you'll join us for all of that. But in order to prepare for that today, we're excited to preview the show and get to talk to one of the creators and writers of Bupkis. It is Dave Sirus. Dave, how you doing?
Hello. I'm fine.
Good. Well, very happy to have you on, Dave. Would love to get started with just hearing about how you're feeling about Bupkis now. Obviously, there was the New York premiere a few days ago, and then the world premiere is happening this week. Are you excited for everybody to get to see this big project you've been working on for a while?
Everyone's going to see it.
Yeah, are you excited?
End of answer.
Except the Russians, right? The Russians won't be able to see it.
As you may see from anything you post on Instagram, Russians and Belarusians, of which I am about half, will not be able to see any American entertainment. But much like Coca-Cola, that's just something Russians just simply can't create on their own. So I don't know how much this is going to affect them, but somewhat, because they don't have Netflix or whatever. They have a lot of stuff embargoed. No, yeah, it's exciting. It's a lot, to have a show come out. And it's something most people never get to do. It's very lucky to get to do that. And I'm going to find out very soon what everyone thinks of it.
Yeah. No, so it's super exciting. And obviously all 8 episodes are going to be released on Thursday. So everyone's going to be able to, binge watch it and see what you guys have been working on. And I was curious to hear, how this project came together. How long have you guys been, tinkering with it and working on it, and just, how Bupkis became the Pete post SNL project?
Well, basically, a couple of years ago, sort of mid-pandemic, we started talking about putting together a show, and Pete expressed interest and wanted to do another autobiographical kind of show, which he hadn't, in a while since, King Staten Island came out, and, that was semi-autobiographical. And then, sort of later in the pandemic, we were talking again about doing something. We were working on a few different scripts, and we loved working with Judah, who was also part of King of Staten Island. So we basically just started talking about generally just sort of using these jumping off points of real stories of Pete's life, and to make this sort of heightened kind of comedy that Pete's really interested in. Pete's comedy sensibilities are, I think, very, very heightened, very sort of surreal. And I think he really wanted to do something that was able to explore that. And, I think if you see the episodes, there's a certain sort of just like a sort of a general heightening that I think is what, the storytelling is, where it's we take these stories from Pete's life that are very weird already, and then sort of barely exaggerate them. And that's all it takes to make them surreal and impossible to believe. And we just sort of, we wrote it. We sort of wrote it together just in generations of just, going through and letting it sort of grow and sort of let it figure out what the show was.
Right. So this is, his second autobiographical piece, and, a lot of his updates, stuff that you touched on was autobiographical as well. So you've been working on his autobiographical stuff for a while. Do you feel like there's a part of yourself that is kind of in this character of Pete that you've basically co-created at this point? Do you see a part of yourself in the product that you're collaborating with him on?
I mean, I guess there's a little bit of that. That's always sort of there because of how much of things that Pete has said were written by me. But I mean, I like to feel like I can write in his voice, and I'm certainly that's what I'm trying to do. But I mean, there are a lot of things that Pete has said that were initially my ideas. So it's like it's impossible to sort of separate to me really myself from everything he does because because there are a lot of sort of just phrases, things that the character says that he said on SNL that are just like he wouldn't have said them on his own if it wasn't like something that I sort of injected. And I think like even politically, for years, a lot of Pete's, sort of, stances and stuff have, come out of our friendship and our, discussions about things. So yeah, I mean, I think that when you're that close friends with someone, you kind of invariably pick up, pieces of each other in that way also, I'd say. I think it's sort of like when you spend much time talking to someone, you develop, a certain similarity, you sort of see what you have in common. And we sort of work together because we have personality traits in common too. So it's sort of hard to know, exactly what's me, but it's definitely in there.
I want to touch on that point because I've heard Pete talk a lot about his relationship with Adam Sandler and how he saw that Sandler left SNL and pursued all these projects with his group of friends and continued to work with the same people over and over. And they had this tight-knit family that worked on stuff. And he said that was a big inspiration for him to get to work with you and some of your other close-knit circle on these projects. So can you tell our audience what it is like to work with friends so closely? Is it, are there positives and negatives, and how does it compare to maybe working with people for the first time?
Well, I mean, I think that when you're close to someone you're working with, there are the advantages of being able to have a certain level of trust and a certain amount of shorthand in like being able to get ideas across. But also there is the issue of you don't want to be harsh or to be dismissive of someone that you care about. So you always, whenever you're working with someone you're close with, you have to have a certain amount of discipline to be able to say, I still need to say if something's right or wrong. I still need to say if something needs to be fixed. And you have to sort of separate friendship and working to an extent because you don't want to just have one interaction, one kind of interaction, because you shouldn't treat your friends like your coworkers and vice versa, in certain scenarios, because that's just what quality control is, of being willing to say when something needs to be better, when something needs to be changed. So, I mean, I think that the big advantage is that we know each other's sense of humor really well and that we know how to play off it and how to build off it. So yeah, I'd say that, but at the same time, anytime you have people who are very close working together, it becomes more like a family thing. It becomes like the way you are with family, where it's like you no longer are as concerned about losing this person, so you can be very real with them. I think that that takes a lot of time and trust to be able to be very open with someone about harsh truths, which is necessary anytime you do something this high level creative. You're writing, you're making jokes, you're writing stories. You have to have a really hard look at things, and you have to be able to trust each other to know that they know what they're talking about, and to listen in maybe a way that maybe you wouldn't listen to someone you didn't know. So I think that's a big advantage too.
Right.
Yeah. And, you touched on the fact that, a lot of, Pete's projects are autobiographical, and, how this project, Pete wanted to go down that lane again. And, you wrote King of Staten Island with him, which, also features elements of his life. Can you talk about, the process of creating another autobiographical, this time a show versus a film, and having to kind of differentiate, or if that was even something you thought about, was, differentiating between, obviously he's playing a character in King of Staten Island versus he's playing himself in this. Can you touch on that a little?
Well, yeah, because in King of Staten Island, it was us with Judd just trying to really, from a faraway place, look at Pete's entire life and say, can we recreate this as a character? And that will be true to what he's gone through in a different world. Whereas now, this is much more connected to modern day real life, and that we're just taking events and stories and situations that Pete has been in, and we're trying to sort of recreate them in a fictional world. So it's like I'd say it's much more present. The stuff we're talking about with Pete is much more having to do with his modern today as opposed to his childhood and when he grew up with, except for episodes that take place in the past. So I think that so I'm trying to explain. I think that the difference is that this is more episodic. This is more about it doesn't have to be major events in Pete's life. It can just be a minor event. It can be just an interesting thing, a person that he happened to meet that turned into an adventure. And I think that in TV in general, compared to movies, you have a lot more freedom to sort of step out and tell weird stories because you don't have to have a major character arc, in an episode of TV. You don't have to have the kind of journey and sort of structure that a movie needs. And I think that sort of opens things up too. And that's a big difference and also that, with a TV show, you can just be crazy. You can be crazy and silly in moments because you don't have to worry about it breaking the logic of an entire movie. So I think that's another advantage. We were able to sort of have a lot more freedom of where these episodes could go. And I think people, when they see this show, are going to be a little surprised at how many different places the show does go, and that the show is a lot less consistent than people may assume after watching one episode than when actually watching through the season. That this is a show that really goes to different places to a big extent.
That makes sense. So if my research is correct, your background is in illustration. Is that right?
Yeah, I went to Syracuse to draw. That's why I do comedy for a living. No one illustrates for money. Well, for money they can live on.
Right.
But yeah, I went to Syracuse. I did a comic strip there. I was doing comic book style drawing and stuff. But I was also doing stand up in college as well. So I'd already I'd started doing something in high school.
Right. So for King of Staten Island, it's my understanding is that you did a lot of the illustrations, a lot of the tattoos that Pete's character was working through. A lot, the Obama, the disproportionate Obama. That's the one that comes to me. Is that right?
Yeah, a lot of the jokey bad tattoos were things I drew, like the Obama on Lou's arm, or the tattoos on the Nazi. So yeah, I drew me and London Reese drew pretty much most of the tattoos that you saw. He did a lot of the ones that were on Bill Burr's back at the end, but I did most of the ones that you see up until that point, all the different weird ones that he gives his friends to show how bad an artist he is. And then I also drew the superhero that he gave to the little kid to show that he actually is capable of being good at drawing, which I had to argue with someone on set because they were like, well, how can he be this good? I'm like, because it's a lot harder on skin than paper. He has potential. He just sucks at tattooing.
Right. So did you get to use your illustration chops at all in Bupkis?
A little bit. Everything you see my character wear, I drew, because I'm not allowed to use copyrighted superhero drawings, which is everything I usually wear. So yeah, you will see a little bit of that. That I drew the stuff that I'm wearing, and not that much more in this one, just because there wasn't a lot of times when it just sort of became necessary. But I had fun doing that and being able to just have them make clothes of stuff that I would, what would I wear if I wasn't allowed to actually wear anything with IP?
Right. Do you enjoy circling back to that skill of yours?
No, I do, because I can still do it, and I did spend a long time doing it, so it's fun. It's just funny how after all that schooling to be an illustrator, the only time I do illustration work is because I hired myself as a producer of something on TV or a movie. So it's the only time I actually get to use my degree to some perverse level. And at least it was good because King of Staten Island, I saved us time and money. I was like, oh, I can do this. And there's other times too, general ideas for logos, or just, I'm able to mock things up. I'm able to do I can storyboard if I need to. So it is an interesting little skill that occasionally comes in handy.
Yeah. Have you ever tattooed somebody in real life?
No, No, I always figured that like no one wants someone without any tattoos tattooing them. Like I just don't believe that you can trust someone. This is actually a true story. I sold some tattoos to a tattoo parlor as a kid that needed like certain designs, and I had people saying I should try to go into tattoos because it's one of the only paying jobs for people who draw. And I remember a friend of mine, I was thinking about that, and a friend of mine who's also Jewish said he was like, you can't be a tattoo artist because every tattoo artist eventually gets asked to give someone a swastika tattoo. And I was like, why do you think I would give someone a swastika tattoo? Like, if someone wants a swastika tattoo, don't you want them to have a swastika tattoo? Don't
Right.
you want
their
that?
forehead.
Don't you want it visible to the rest of the world? Not just one in their head, but the one on their skin. Like, I feel like that's a mitzvah to get to
Yes.
show.
I completely agree. And I
I'll do
think
it
that
for
I would
free.
trust you. I would trust you to do a tattoo, I think.
Are you gonna make
Yeah,
this happen?
No,
or?
I mean,
I would do it. I'm down.
well, I mean, I know there are people who have tattoos of things I've drawn. Like, I
Okay.
know someone who got a tattoo of the Ruby Tattoos Day logo from King of Staten Island, and that was something I drew. So that was really cool and weird and disturbing. But I was really flattered she got it.
I'm looking for my next tattoo. Let me know if you have any ideas.
I know when I came up with the name Ruby Tattoos Day, I was like, if any of the other names for restaurants pass, I'm going to lose my goddamn mind. I remember like people were talking, it was Ruby Tattoos Day, and like there were also other like, pitches, like, for names. Like I also had Stick and Poke, but I was like, this is one of those things where like I will lose all faith in everyone if they don't absolutely assume Ruby. And then Ruby Tattoo Day wasn't in the first draft, was the first cut of the movie, and I was like, what the hell is going on? You got to be goddamn kidding me.
Yeah, no. Brilliant.
Dave, you brought up that you are actually a character in Bupkis, which is news to me. I didn't know that, which is very exciting. Can you preview, your character in the show and what your role is?
I mean, I have a very small part. Pete asked that he wanted his friends to play themselves, and so I had to audition to be myself, and as executive producer, give them the options of who I think should play me instead. So I play what I would consider a cartoonish caricature of what people who don't really know me think I am. I think that because of how little I'm actually in the show, I think it kind of devolved into being like the most cartoonish version of who, like, an outsider who met me once might try to say if they were in a roast battle with me. And you'll see. It's definitely like I feel like I am the most caricatured in terms of like the character versus me. Whereas like, and I know this might upset them, everyone else is exactly like their character on the show. Right? And believe me, there are several people who are going to be extremely angry about that. And that's why I said it. I want them to know I am the only one playing an embarrassing version of myself. The rest of them are actually those people.
Who's on the short list, though, for you, Dave, to play yourself?
Oh, the names I gave were Daniel Radcliffe, Annie Putty, and Elijah Wood, but he has to work out. Elijah Wood, I'd have to see the audition. He can't just be Elijah Wood. He would have to have a certain amount of, I feel, menace to him. I feel like if he could really sort of, I mean, then again, a lot of people have compared me to the character he played in Sin City, so maybe he could pull it off. He's a great actor.
Yeah, well, another person that's going to be in the show that I'm very excited to see is Joe Pesci. Joe Pesci, doesn't work a lot these days. I think the last time he was even on TV was in a cameo in the Rob Lowe hosted episode of SNL in the 90s. So how did you guys, get Joe Pesci to be a part of this? Was he a fan of Pete and anything like that? Or, that is it's kind of a feat to get him to work.
I know that, I think it was that Lorne introduced them, and they got along really well. I mean, Pete is a very likable, guy. He's very, he's like a guy that like people gravitate toward. Like even before he was famous, like it was just this thing where like I think people just sort of like him. And Joe, just really, I think they have a lot in common. To be honest, I feel like Joe seems to me a lot like what Pete will be like at 80. So like they just got along, and I basically, Pete doesn't drink that much, but him and Pesci, had drinks, had martinis, and I think Pete had to try to keep up. And the same thing happened with our executive producer Judah, where like both of them who don't drink a lot were like, well, Joe Pesci's making martinis. I have absolutely no choice here but to keep up with this man who weighs a lot less than me, but appears much more adept at drinking. Not, you know what I mean? Like just that he's a guy. He makes his own martinis. He makes them perfect. He knows what he's doing. Whereas Pete and Judah are kind of lightweights, and they just hung out, and everyone got along, and it was great. And then I got to hang out with Joe, and he's just this sweet, cool guy who you've grown up, being terrified of, and it's really great. But yeah, Pete just enticed him. Pete made him want to work, which, Joe Pesci doesn't work unless he feels like it, and it's, even with like The Irishman, Scorsese talks about, having to like get him to do it, having to like, that it's, he doesn't just, say yes to anything, that was for The Irishman, I mean, it was a real, mind because, when you write something, that's stressful. When you write something and then you're watching Joe Pesci say it out loud, things get really real. You're like, okay, maybe I should have spent more time on that sentence.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a mindfuck reading that, like in the trades, that he was going to join the show. So I don't know, maybe Pesci will put in a good word with Marty, and maybe Pete will be in the next Scorsese movie. You never know.
I mean, and Edie Falco. I feel like Edie Falco, seeing her deliver your lines, if you grew up watching The Sopranos, that's just nuts.
She's so good. The thing about Edie is that like she's so versatile and she's so game for anything that like you basically can give her anything. And I've never seen her balk at anything. I've never seen her not want to do anything. She is such a pro. And I mean, you've seen some of the things that occur with her in the show.
First scene.
She's a sport.
Yeah.
She's a real sport. And she's so funny. She's able to pull off craziness. Like she's able to pull off surreal, unrealistic, like surreal atmosphere, things that are just like so far from reality, and she's able to own it and make it grounded and make it real in a way that really helps us so much. There were a lot of actors in this that really did an amazing job of taking the material and expanding on it and making it better and making it realer. I mean, Edie, Brad Garrett especially, I thought does an amazing job with that. Una, who plays Pete's sister, was someone who like I was really, really happy with how she was able to interpret a lot of the material. And just, that's one of the things that I think is the best thing about this show is that we really had so many talented performers elevating what we were doing.
Do you have Edie spend time with Amy Davidson in order to kind of prepare for the role, or is it just the kind of the caricature?
I forget how much time they actually spent. I know that they did interact. Yes, I know that they did spend some time. I can't say off the top of my head like exactly what it was or how much time, but 100%. They definitely interacted. She wanted to learn about Amy, and it's the same thing with Marissa Tomei. We're not asking for an impression. No one is expecting an impression of someone. You're just sort of saying, okay, here's what I know about this character, and here's how I think that person should be. And they're putting themselves in it. Like in both times, they made a new character out of this information. It was never about trying to become someone else, but there's so much you can learn from the person.
Right. And I feel like the storyline with Pete's father and the experience and, watching Edie play that out, it's such a personal thing. Is there like an added pressure to kind of get that sort of right or do right by, his mom and his sister in terms of that story being portrayed and shown to the world?
I mean, I think you just sort of do what seems natural and then trust that it's going to fall into place because she's a really good actor and, it's Pete. So, he knows his family, so you trust that he knows how to, interpret that. I mean, whenever you have a character who is named for a real person and is based on a real living person, there's a lot of weirdness there because real people, who are not in the entertainment industry often, they expect a level of accuracy that is absolutely unnecessary. You know what I mean? Like when you have someone, especially if someone not famous, if Casey or Amy, wanted, they could be like, I want this person to be exactly like me, and that's something you run into a lot. They understand more because this isn't the first time even having someone portray them. But, I think at one point, I remember making King of Staten Island, Casey was just like, why is Maud so short? It's like, well, she's not exactly you. And neither Maud nor Una are as tall as Casey, who's actually she's actually more athletic than either of them. She played basketball in college. She's taller than me. So, you can't get everything exactly the same. But no, we had some, really great performances out of them. And I think that, and I can say from what I've seen, Amy seemed extremely happy seeing, how things were done. And I think, with both Marissa and Edie, there were so few people we thought could play these parts. I know that Edie was part of the conversation when we picked Marissa. And she probably would have been the next person we went to. Because there's just so few people where needs to be someone in New York, it needs to be someone the right age, someone with the right level of talent. And it's and someone that, you've seen before, we preferred. So there were honestly very few people that I could really see playing this part. And I don't think there's literally anyone who would have done as good a job as Edie did. She's like, I can't explain how cool she is. Like both that she's a cool person, but that she's just cool with whatever you want to do. She's just like open. She's just open and every day it seemed like she was having fun and she was happy to be there. And she just loves to act and just loves to work and be a part of stuff. It was really, really awesome.
That's amazing to hear. I know that we saw the list of guest stars and there's just so many great names on there. And I think that the fans of Saturday Night Live are most excited potentially about having Jane Curtin as a guest star on the show. So would love to know what went into that, an original cast member.
Here's the funny thing about Jane Curtin. I don't know if she was cast, but I wasn't, directly like at every level casting. I did suggest her, and then when I found out she got the part, I was like, "Oh my god, was that because of me?" Because I did suggest her originally for the grandmother, and I was like, it's Jane Curtin. I love Jane Curtin so much. And here's the thing about Jane Curtin: she's very famous, and she's not playing a huge part. She plays Pete's grandmother in episode 2, and she could have just walked on and just played his grandmother. Yet, and Amanda, I don't know if you noticed it, her accent was fucking amazing. Like, I was so amazed at how much work. I mean, maybe it's no work to her at all. Maybe it's just effortless. But I was like, her Staten Island accent was perfect for someone who is already a star. Did not need to do that for the part, but elevated it. And I was so excited she was there. And so happy to see her and have her as just on it. I mean, that was so cool to me because I've always loved Jane Curtin. She's so good. She is so good in that part. And I mean, I love her accent. I love the accent she created for that episode.
Yeah, she's honestly
one of nothing
like she's people's favorite cast member of all time. Like a lot of our fans. So it's so great to get to see her again. I'm sure.
Yeah, no, she does. Yeah, she has a very small, very important part in that second episode. Like, I don't mean to say it's small, but I mean like she does so much with what few scenes she has that it's really, really funny. And I got one of the things that I got to write in that episode, because that was really more of a Pete episode, because it's basically him just retelling a story from his life, is basically, there's a scene where she's given a toast, and I tried to make it as backhanded a toast as possible. You know, one of those things where, like, you're trying to be nice, but you're really just warning someone.
I think you succeeded.
Well, I can't wait to watch that as a huge Jane Curtin fan myself. As John mentioned, a ton of other amazing guest stars that you guys had lined up for the show. I feel like you might have just answered the question talking about Jane, but who are you guys like most excited and most surprised to be like, wow, we got this person to be part of our show, and who were you most excited to write for?
It's a good question, because as you say that, I want to make sure that we've already announced these people. Did we announce?
Yeah, they're basically all up on Wikipedia. I can
On
read you the list, but
Wikipedia,
basically on
there's
Wikipedia, there's an entire
list.
guest list.
Okay, so can you just tell me if I'm correct that we've already announced that Jon Stewart's in it?
Yes.
Yes.
I believe. Yes, I see his name.
Because
Yeah.
if not, you have to.
Yeah.
Okay, Al Gore.
He's on the list.
Al Gore.
Was in the preview also.
Yeah. That's what I want to know. How the hell did you get in touch with Al Gore?
Well, Al Gore, Pete and I had already worked with. We had done a climate summit of his where I wrote this bit for him to do with Pete. Very hacky. Just a bit where Pete would teach him how to use slang to connect to kids about climate change. Calling calling rises in sea levels ratchet AF. It's very dumb. So we already had a relationship with Al, and we were just so excited to have him, we want to do this climate summit thing, something like who's the most respectable person on earth? It's Al Gore. So that day we were shooting with John and Al, which I'd met them both before, but those are the two people I've been the most excited to meet. And they just happened to be there the same day. And those are the two people that I was the most excited to meet, like, in my life, in the previous times that I met them. Those are the only two people I've ever felt sort of in awe of and like amazed that I was like hanging out with. So yeah, those are my favorite people. There's a lot of people that are like really cool to have on a show. Method Man is there, and he's great. Method Man is just funny. Sebastian Stan, was really funny to have. Who's actually friends with Phil, who plays Evan on the show. It was so cool to have them. He was like, that they're friends and that they could come in and like do this fun scene. Keenan plays the same role on our show that he does on SNL, the guy who gets all the laughs every time you look at him.
Right.
Yeah, there was really like a lot of people who were just like, we were just really lucky to have. Paul Walter Hauser is amazing. He is so funny. He steals his episode. I think he really he is such a natural comedian, such a natural performer. He is amazing. I really, really was like loving every second of him on camera. I wanted to keep like everything he made up and just put it all in the show. I was like, just use it all. Just use every word that he improvised, basically.
Paul is amazing. I love his episode of I Think You Should Leave, the Tim Robinson show. But following up on that question, you've already mentioned Jane Curtin is playing Pete's grandmother, and I imagine some people on this list are playing fictional characters, and some people are playing, their real, kind of fictionalized versions of themselves. How did you guys kind of determine, we want this person, to kind of, play themselves versus, just playing another character in the world of the show?
It was just really simple of just, we had parts to fill. And, Pete, he wanted to basically have as many people he knew, as many people who are exciting for the audience as possible. He wanted to really just stack the show. So a lot of times it was, as part of, portraying a celebrity life, you're going to have celebrities in it. But then at the same time, all regular people, if we could, we wanted to be someone exciting, someone a big surprise. So it wasn't really any kind of, system. It was just, what's this episode and who belongs in it, and, who could play what. with Steve Buscemi, there were a few different parts that we always intended on Steve playing a character rather than himself, because he's such an amazing character actor. It's almost wasted to have him be himself and not, let him really show how good a goddamn actor he is. So yeah, I mean, he's in episode 2, and we originally he was going to play a fertility doctor. We had a filthy scene involving a fertility doctor that we did not actually end up using. That we were planning on Steve playing, which would have been both funny and deeply disturbing, and sexy. Steve is sexy. And then, like, the last episode, literally, Pete was calling people like the day before shooting just to be like, "Hey, I think we have room for like one more person in here. That'll be like a fun surprise." It was like we were just throwing people into like these scenes and just like expanding them and trying to add jokes to them and just being like, let's do all we can. Let's do as much cool stuff as we can with the time we have.
So obviously we're all big fans of Pete's, and I feel like now everyone in the world is a big fan of Pete Davidson. But if I wasn't, hypothetically, how would you explain the show to me, or how would you pitch the show to me if you were to be in that position for whatever reason?
I would just say it's an unexpected and unprecedented kind of comedy about how weird it can be to be a celebrity. And
Interesting.
It's a show that is both very grounded and very insane and surreal at the same time. It's a show that a lot is going on, and it's not a predictable show, and it's not like anything you've seen before. If you want something that's different, whatever you think of it, you'll agree with that. It's like anti-Entourage almost.
I love that.
And when I say anti-Entourage, I don't mean that it's post-Entourage or that it's the opposite of Entourage, but it is to Entourage what an anti-hero is to a hero.
Yeah.
Got it. So, Dave, I'd love to transition over to some SNL questions, if that's cool with you, because you used to be a staff writer for the show in season 41. And I'd love to hear about, how that experience was for you. Also, some of the sketches that you worked on, because I know that most people know you for working on update pieces with Pete directly. But can you tell us about some of the sketches that you worked on while you were on the show that year?
Well, when I was there that year, I was there for that 1 year, 41, and then from that point onward, I would still come back to write with Pete for pretty much almost all of his update features. There was only maybe 2 or 3 over that course that I wasn't involved with for various reasons, but almost every single one we co-wrote. When I was there, the only sketches that I ever really excelled at writing for were cold opens. Where a lot of different writers would contribute for those, and politics sketches were just much more my wheelhouse than sort of stage sketch type of stuff, typical improv or typical UCB type sketches. The actual sort of joke bucket political sketches, things like the debates, I got a lot of stuff into. It was pretty much only cold opens. I would usually have something with cold opens. I mean, there was one I wrote a lot of that was Chris Christie and pitching vice presidents to Trump. I know that like a lot of the primary debates, I had a lot of lines, and I remember one line. I think it was cut for the live show, but that I really loved. The line I had of I think it was Ted Cruz talking about Donald Trump, saying, Donald Trump does not represent the Republican Party. The Republican Party does not say racist things. We imply them over decades of policy.
So good. Yeah.
I know that one of my jokes was was Larry as Bernie Sanders saying, people think I can't get black voters. When I ran for Senator of Vermont, I got 50% of the black vote. His name is Marcus.
That's a very good one. So you're telling me, like in the entire season 41, you never contributed to any of like the live sketches beyond the cold opens?
Well, I mean, a little bit, but not the vast majority of things that I got in were cold open sketches. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, good. Yeah, it's good for us to know because we love to, like, when we analyze sketches, we love to know from the perspective of the writer. So it always helps to know what you got to work on, and it's fascinating to hear from that side of things. So, anyways, I know we have a lot of SNL stuff to get into. So, Sammy, let me send it over to you for another SNL question for Dave.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, you worked a lot with Pete on the show, and you would contribute to his pieces, going forward after season 41. Are there any other cast members or writers that you really liked working with, or just hanging out with when you were a staff writer on the show?
As a staff writer that year, the other people that I really interacted with most were Jay Farrow and John Rudnitsky. They were both they were people that I also would write stuff with, and we would work on ideas. Aside from that, I mean, there were still a lot of other people there who I just really liked, who, even though I didn't really work with as much, were really cool to have around. Very specifically, Vanessa Bayer is an extremely kind person who really goes out of her way to make new people feel comfortable. Colin Jost, he actually is the person that he portrays himself as. He's really that nice. Like, Colin's actually that good a person. Like, Colin's he's there's nothing you don't like see. Like, he really is like that much like a genuine, like, cool guy. So those are people I really liked interacting with. Bobby Moynihan, I loved. Taran Killam, so cool, so nice, so incredibly talented. And then later, because I obviously kept coming back, Alex Moffat, I think, is really a great, incredibly talented guy who I loved getting to do stuff with. And the PDD guys, I worked with them on the NBC New Year special, and I've hung out with them before, on set, and they are just such great, talented kids. Gave me credit in this article about what's the meanest thing anyone's ever said to you, and I was so honored that they used my name and said that I called them the toddlers in the hall. It was just very nice of them.
That's great.
That tracks. So you talk about writing a lot for the cold opens, the political cold opens, because that was leading up to the 2016 election. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes. Is there anything? So, now we're nearing an election. We're in the middle of an election cycle, approaching, kind of the hotbed area of it. How would you approach that kind of material differently? And is there anything that has happened over the last, 6 years that would change kind of your feelings? I know some of us are sometimes feeling burnt out by the political cold open, and maybe just burnt out by politics in general since Donald Trump's presidency. Do you think that would be reflected in your comedy writing at all?
I mean, especially that kind of writing, topical writing changes constantly. So, like, the joke would always be very dependent on where we are in time. So I think everything's constantly changing. I do think, like most comedians, most comedy writers, that Trump was a big detriment on comedy because he made the world hacky. He made reality, like, dumb. He made the whole world much more childish, and that's a much harder thing to be snarky about and to make fun of and to try to extrapolate, what could this become? What's the heightened version of this? You can't heighten. I forget who said it. One of the talk show hosts was like, you can't make fun of a monkey covering itself in poop and running into a wall. Like, what's left to make fun of that it did to itself? I like the fact that, things are changing, and even though they're not changing enough, that we are seeing, like, how things, because new comedy comes out of every time the dynamic changes. So you can have new ways of making fun of something every time things evolve, and things are very different. Trump is a very, very different sort of character now than he was a few years ago. He's much more bloodied. He's much more exposed. And he's much more of, in a technical, objective way, a loser. He's someone who's lost a lot. He's not this guy who used to be like, how is this guy winning things when he doesn't deserve to or doesn't seem to know what he's doing? And now it's like, okay, reality has sort of reasserted itself a little bit. The world makes a little bit more sense. And, look, you make jokes based on whatever happened that week, really.
Right. Right. You famously worked on one of Pete's segments that touched on, when people were really up in arms about trans women using women's bathrooms. But if, that was however many years ago. But if you look today that, trans rights are still front and center on the chopping block from a Republican talking point stand.
I have to be honest, I really thought that update would close the book on that conversation and trans people would be completely accepted into society, and somehow it didn't work. So I consider that my failure.
Right. But you have another chance this week to take another stab at closing the door.
Yeah. This time we'll fix it. We'll fix everything. But yeah, that was actually one of the pieces I was most proud of. Yeah, I really loved that piece. That was the first time it was the first time that something that like really I had written was at the table and made it to the show, and it was mine. You know what I mean? So that was something I really, really liked. But yeah, no, it's my year. We did a lot of things that I was proud of. Like a lot of those updates had like sort of basis in sort of some kind of social cause. We did that year. We did trans bathroom. We did gun control. We did slut shaming. It was Hulk Hogan, but still he was being slut shamed. So it was, and we did Trump. And it was a lot of fun, and you got to feel it's cool to feel like you're part of the conversation.
We're recording this as of now, April 30th. So this is finding out exactly if the writers are going to go on strike and when and what the final results are of moving that strike forward or not. So as of now, the Pete Davidson episode of Saturday Night Live is on. And I just would love to know from you, is there any goals for the week with regards to having Pete coming back? I know that we loved what we got to see from him, especially in season 46 during that COVID year where he was, in all of the sketches, really felt like he was giving 100% in every episode. And that's what I'm looking forward to most, is having like Pete come back and be really into it and excited about being there. So for you, what are you looking forward to as far as writing for Pete this week?
I mean, nothing specific. We just want to do a good show. And, it's going to be interesting because we've never seen an SNL episode where Pete was in every sketch.
Right.
By far. So that's going to be interesting because he's never, you don't really usually see any cast member in every sketch. So this is going to be, it's going to be harder than a typical episode. That's for sure. It's going to be really fun though, because, it's very weird because I remember when hosts would come in with their own writers and what the dynamic was. And now I'm that guy. I'm the writer being brought in by a host, and I know a lot of the people there. So it's going to be a very weird dynamic, especially after I start really flexing that power and pushing people around. So I feel like it's going to be really interesting. So to answer your question, what I'm most looking forward to, it's the power balance of when I'm able to tell people who I used to be the equals of what to do.
Do you have do you have any fun memories of a host when you were there coming in with their own writers?
I remember, I actually remember Julie Louis-Dreyfus brought writers from Veep, and I ended up writing a lot of her monologue with them, which was really fun. I remember those guys being really, really fun, and I remember like just thinking like, wow, why do these guys think I'm so much funnier than everyone else here?
You should have gone to work for Veep.
I know. That was a good example of like, because most of them don't bring writers, but like the ones who are like funny people often will, like specifically like Julia, who is God, Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
If you could appear on the show this week, would that be something you'd be interested in?
Oh, being like on camera?
Mm-hmm.
Not really. It doesn't really matter to me. I don't need to be seen. I think that like I love comedy, and I've been doing stand-up and performing comedy for most of my life, but I never really felt like I needed to be on screen. Nor do I feel like it's the best use of my abilities to be on screen. I think I'm a good writer, and I think I can perform comedy well. I am not charismatic. which is a very inextricable. You can't remove that part of the business. So I just feel like anytime I'm on camera, it's forced. Like, even if I do a good job, I feel like it's just like, I don't think I'm doing a better job than I would be just writing. So I don't try to get on camera. I did not at all push to be on Bupkis on screen, like not even close. I kind of fought it a little bit. I kind of suggested, I was like, I don't know, guys. I don't think I'm qualified. I literally said that. I was like, I don't think I'm qualified to be playing myself. And people were like, oh, shut up, just do it.
Yeah, I would just push back lightly that you're not charismatic at all. That seems like excessively self-deprecating to me, having spoke to you for an hour now, but.
Okay, and thank you, but every single person I've ever roast battled will disagree with you.
Okay.
It's not a coincidence that that's the one thing every single person I've roast battled has come up with. I promise. You're just nice. You're just a good person.
I'm not. But
right now, and the right thing to say is that there's no such thing as an uncharismatic person, but it's me. It's clearly me. Here's the problem also. This is like a podcast. So I'm actually not bad audio. I think I have a nice voice. But when you can see my face saying it, it ruins everything.
Well, we maybe have bad news for you. This is also going to be in video, so
It's also on YouTube.
I see. Well, if you're watching this on YouTube, I have a lot of videos you can look up from 10 years ago. So feel free.
yeah, no, I think you're doing great, and everything's looking great. And I do have a question about, obviously, you're clearly a fan of comedy, and obviously getting to, join a show like SNL. You might have people, or you might have watched the show as a kid, or when you're first starting to get into comedy. Was there anybody on SNL or any writer in particular that you kind of looked up to, or that kind of was the person that got you into the show or into comedy or anything like that?
You mean like before I was involved with it, like watching the show?
Yeah, or like if you grew up watching SNL or anything like that.
By a wide margin. I mean, my favorite comedy writers in the world are many of them SNL writers. I think in terms of who I was the most inspired by, that is definitely Robert Smigel. Overall, who I've worked with very closely for many years now. With him last night. I love Robert. I would often, go through old episodes of SNL just scrolling to his cartoons, like on Hulu. Because I love TV Funhouse so much, both the Comedy Central and the NBC versions. And that and Al Franken, whose books I've read all of, who was also someone who is just a prolific writer. Those were definitely the people who I'm most influenced by. I mean, I've loved Triumph Pizza Comic Dog for 20-something years. And Conan. I think Conan is maybe the funniest person alive right now. But yeah, those people, I think, in terms of as a comedy writer, Robert Smigel, in terms of a novelist, Al Franken, and in terms of a human being, Conan. They're so goddamn good.
Yeah. Well, Dave, I mean, this has been an absolute blast to go through all of this with you, both Bupkis and Saturday Night Live. I know that, you prefer to talk about your writing and your work, and that's what we wanted to do today, was get to celebrate your work. So I'm happy that we got to do that and hear some background about you and putting in everything into this. So for all of the listeners, if you would love to see Bupkis, like I said, comes out May 4th on Peacock. It'll be a full release, but what we're going to do here on the podcast is on Thursday, May 4th at 8 p.m. Eastern, I'll be live with Sammy and Amanda, and we're going to recap episodes 1 and 2. So the first 2 episodes, that's all you got to watch. You come over here, we'll recap it, and then we're going to let you know the schedule for the rest of the episodes throughout the week. If there is an SNL episode this week, and that's a big if, but I'm really hoping so, then we will be live right after the Pete Davidson episode of Saturday Night Live to break everything down on the Hot Take Show. We got our roundtable, by the numbers, and patron feedback show as usual. If there isn't, we'll have full Bupkis coverage for you all week long. So that's the plan here on the podcast. Dave, anything else you'd like to say to the SNL community about the show?
Absolutely not. But thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Sammy Kay, thank you for joining us. Where can listeners check out everything you got going on?
Over here at the Saturday Night Network, and you can follow me at that Sammy Kay on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. This has been a pleasure, Dave. Thanks for coming on.
And Amanda, thank you for joining us as well. Where can the listeners check out what you have going on?
I'm a lawyer, so there's nothing for you to check out that I have going on. But Dave, I'm serious. You want to try tattooing? Let me know. I trust you. I really do.
Okay, yeah, let's do it.
All right, could be fun. You can find everything we got going on here at the SNL Network on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. You can find me at Jon Schneider 24 if you want to reach out directly, and make sure to subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcast, Spotify, wherever you listen to the show. All right, Dave, thanks for joining us. We will see you next time, everybody. Have a good one.